Hi, welcome back to Storytime. So today we're going to be finishing Murder on the Links, Part 4. It's kind of fun having these stories be like just 4 parts. In the future it's going to change depending on like how long the books are, but these ones that I've been reading by Agatha Christie have been pretty consistent to like 4 videos each, although I have to go back and try to re-record. Which one was it? I don't remember. But I don't know how the Twitch export wasn't working, so I still don't have a video for the 4th part, the conclusion, up on YouTube. I'm hoping to do that again soon. Yes, anyways, after this story, we could go ahead and read The Secret Adversary, which is a something in tuppence, I forget their names. I guess they're a couple who investigates, something like that. But I thought it would be fun to read some of the short stories. I will be buying the book called Poirot Investigates, which is just a bunch of short stories. They're small little Poirot cases, and I think they're probably going to be take an hour to read, so we can do little filler episodes. And since I'm going to be doing a lot of Christmas reading, per the poll, what do they call it? Results. Due to poll results, people voted to have just Christmas reads on December. So since I don't want to do a whole book before I do that, I thought I'd do some of the short stories. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. And let me find, here we go. So I'm making Maestro disappear, and we will continue with the book. Chapter 21, Hercule Poirot on the Case. In a measured voice, Poirot began his exposition. It seems strange to you, mon ami, that a man should plan his own death. So strange that you prefer to reject the truth as fantastic, and to revert to a story that is in reality 10 times more impossible. Yes, Monsieur Renaud planned his own death, but there is one detail that perhaps escapes you. He did not intend to die. I shook my head, bewildered. But it is almost simple, really, said Poirot kindly, for the crime that Monsieur Renaud proposed to murder was not necessary, as I told you, but a body was. Let us reconstruct, seeing events this time from a different angle. Georges Careau flies from justice to Canada. There, under an assumed name, he marries and finally acquires a vast fortune in South America. But there is a nostalgia upon him for his own country. Perhaps 20 years have elapsed. He is considerably changed in appearance, besides being a man of such eminence that no one is likely to connect him with a fugitive from justice many years ago. He deems it quite safe to return. He takes up his headquarters in England, but intends to spend the summers in France. And ill fortune, or that obscure justice which shapes men's ends, and will not allow them to evade the consequences of their acts, takes him to Merlinville. There, in the whole of France, is the one person who is capable of recognizing him. It is, of course, a gold mine to Madame d'Aubriel, and a gold mine of which she is now not slow to take advantage. He is helpless, absolutely in her power, and she bleeds him heavily. And then the inevitable happens. Jacques Renaud falls in love with the beautiful girl he sees almost daily, and wishes to marry her. That rouses his father. At all costs he will prevent his son marrying the daughter of this evil woman. Jacques Renaud knows nothing of his father's past, but Madame Renaud knows everything. She is a woman of great force of character and passionately devoted to her husband. They take counsel together. Renaud sees only one way of escape: death. He must appear to die, in reality escaping to another country, where he will start again under an assumed name, and where Madame Renaud, having played the widow's part for a while, can join him. It is essential that she should have control of the money, so he alters his will. How they meant to manage the body business originally I do not know, possibly an art student's skeleton under fire, or something of the kind, but long before their plans have matured, an event occurs which plays into their hands. A rough tramp, violent and abusive, finds his way into the garden. There is a struggle. Renaud seeks to eject himself, and suddenly the tramp, an epileptic, falls down in a fit. He is dead. Renaud calls his wife. Together they drag him into the shed. As we know, the event has occurred just outside, and they realize the marvelous opportunity that has been vouchsafed them. The man bears no resemblance to Renaud, but he is middle-aged, of a usual French type. That is sufficient. I rather fancy that they sat on the bench up there, out of earshot from the house, discussing matters. The plan was quickly made. The identification must rest solely on Madame Renaud's evidence. Jacques Renaud and the chauffeur, who have been with his master 2 years, must be got out of the way. It is unlikely that the French women servants would go near the body, and in any case, Renaud intends to take measures to deceive anyone not likely to appreciate details. Masters was sent off, a telegram dispatched to Jack, Buenos Aires, being selected to give credence to the story that Renaud has decided upon. Having heard of me as a rather obscure elderly detective, he wrote his appeal for help, knowing that when I arrived, the production of the letter would have a profound effect upon the examining magistrate, which of course it did. They dressed the body of the tramp in a suit of Renaud's, and left his ragged coat and trousers by the door of the shed, not daring to take them into the house. And then, to give credence to the tale Madame Renaud was to tell, they drove the airplane dagger through his heart. That night, Renaud will first bind and gag his wife, and then, taking a spade, will dig a grave in that particular plot of ground where he knows you call it bunker, is to be made. It is essential that the body should be found. Madame d'Aubrion must have no suspicions. On the other hand, if a little time elapses, any dangers as to identify will be greatly lessened. Then Jacques Renaud will don the tramp's rags and shuffle off to the station, where he will leave unnoticed by the 12:10 train. Since the crime will be supposed to have taken place 2 hours later, no suspicion can possibly attach to him. You see now his annoyance at the inopportune visit of the girl, Bella. Every moment of delay is fatal to his plans. He gets rid of her as soon as he can, however. Then to work. He leaves the front door slightly ajar to create the impression that assassins left that way. He binds and gags Madame Renaud, correcting his mistake of 2 years ago. Then, when the looseness of the bonds caused suspicion to fall upon his accomplice, but leaving her primed with essentially the same story as he had invented before, proving the unconscious recoil of the mind against originality. The night is chilly, and he slips on an overcoat over his underclothing, intending to cast into the grave with the dead man. Hang on a second. Maestro, hey, stop it. Sorry, a little bit of a tiff between kitties. I have to find my place again. Here we are. The night is chilly, and he slips on an overcoat over his underclothing, intent to cast it into the grave with the dead man. He goes out by the window, smoothing over the flower bed carefully, and thereby furnishing the most positive evidence against himself. He goes out onto the lonely golf links, and he digs, and then—" "Yes?" "And then," said Poirot gravely, "the justice that he has so long eluded overtakes him. An unknown hand stabs him in the back. Now, Hastings, you understand what I mean when I say talk of two crimes. The first crime, the crime that Monsieur Renaud, in his arrogance, asked us to investigate, is solved. But behind it lies a deeper riddle, and to solve that will be difficult, since the criminal, in his wisdom, has been content to avail himself of the devices prepared by Renaud. It has been a particularly perplexing and baffling mystery to solve." "You're marvelous, Poirot," I said with admiration. "Absolutely marvelous! No one on earth but you would have done it." I think my praise pleased him. For once in his life he looked almost embarrassed. "The poor Giraud," said Poirot, trying unsuccessfully to look modest. "Without doubt it is not all stupidity. He has had la mauvaise chance once or twice. That dark hair coiled round the dagger, for instance. To say the least, it was misleading." "To tell you the truth, Poirot," I said slowly, "even now I don't quite see. Whose hair was it?" "Madame Renaud's, of course. That is where la mauvaise chance came in. Her hair, dark originally, is almost completely silvered. It might just as easily have been a grey hair, and then, by no conceivable effort, could Giraud have persuaded himself it came from the head of Jacques Renaud. But it is all of a piece. Always the facts must be twisted to fit the theory." Without doubt, when Madame Renaud recovers, she will speak. The possibility of her son being accused of the murder never occurred to her. How should it, when she believed him safely at sea on board the Anzora? Ah, voilà une femme, Hastings. What force, what self-command! She only made one slip on his unexpected return. It does not matter now. And no one noticed. No one realized the significance of those words. What a terrible part she has had to play, poor woman. Imagine the shock when she goes to identify the body, and instead of what she expects, sees the actual lifeless form of the husband she has believed miles away by now. No wonder she fainted. But since then, despite her grief and her despair, how resolutely she has played her part, and how the anguish of it must wring her. She cannot say a word to set us on the track of the real murderers. For her son's sake, no one must know that Paul Renaud was Georges Connu, the criminal. Final and most bitter blow, she has admitted publicly that Madame d'Aubriel was her husband's mistress, for a hint of blackmail might be fatal to her secret. How cleverly she dealt with the examining magistrate when he asked her if there was any mystery in her husband's past life. Nothing so romantic, I am sure, monsieur. It was perfect, the indulgent tone, the soupçon of sad mockery. At once, Monsieur Otet felt himself foolish and melodramatic. Yes, she is a great woman. She loved a criminal. She loved him royally. Poirot lost himself in contemplation. One thing more, Poirot. What about the piece of lead piping? You do not see? To disfigure the victim's face so that it would be unrecognizable. It was that which first set me on the right track. That imbecile of a Giraud swarming all over to look for match ends. Did I not tell you that a clue of 2 foot long was quite as good as a clue of 2 inches? You see, Hastings, we must now start again. Who killed Monsieur Renaud? Someone who was near the villa just before 12 o'clock that night. Someone who would benefit by his death. The description fits Jacques Renaud only too well. The crime did not have to be premeditated. And then the dagger. I started. I had not realized that point. Of course, I said. Mrs. Renaud's dagger was the second one we found in the tramp. And there were two then. Certainly. And since they were duplicates, it stands to reason that Jacques Renaud was the owner. But that would not trouble me so much. In fact, I had little idea as to that. No, the worst indictment against him is again psychological. Hereditary, mon ami, hereditary. Like father, like son. Jacques Renaud, when all is said and done, is the son of Georges Renaud. His tone was grave and earnest, and I was impressed in spite of myself. "What is your little idea that you mentioned just now?" I asked. For answer, Poirot consulted his turnip-faced watch, and then asked, "What time is the afternoon boat from Calais?" "About 5, I believe." "It will do very well. We shall just have time." "You are going to England?" "Yes, my friend." "Why?" To find a possible witness." "Who?" With a rather peculiar smile upon his face, Poirot replied, "Miss Bella Duveen." "But how will you find her? What do you know about her?" "I know nothing about her, but I can guess a good deal. We may take it for granted that her name is Bella Duveen, and since that name was faintly familiar to Monsieur Stoner, though evidently not in connection with the Renaud family, it is probable that she is on the stage. Jacques Renaud was a young man with plenty of money and 20 years of age. The stage is sure to have been the home of his first love. It tallies, too, with Monsieur Renaud's attempt to placate her with a cheque. I think I shall find her all right, especially with the help of this." And he brought out the photograph I had seen him take from Jacques Renaud's drawer. "With love from Bella" was scrawled across the corner, but it was not that which held my eyes fascinated. The likeness was not first-rate, but for all that it was unmistakable to me. I felt a cold sinking, as though some unutterable calamity had befallen me. It was the face of Cinderella. I kind of had the feeling that it might be Cinderella. Cinderella, in case you missed the first part, is the woman that he meets on the train, that Hastings meets on the train when he's on his way back to London. And she's so fun to read, too. Sorry about the drinking sounds. I'm just hydrating. Chapter 22. I Find Love. For a moment or two I sat as though frozen, the photograph still in my hand. Then, summoning all of my courage to appear unmoved, I handed it back. At the same time, I stole a quick glance at Poirot. Had he noticed anything? But to my relief, he did not seem to be observing me. Anything unusual in my manner had certainly escaped him. I bet it hasn't escaped him. He rose briskly to his feet. "We have no time to lose. We must make our departure with all dispatch. All is well. The sea, it will be calm." In the bustle of departure, I had no time for thinking, but once on board the boat, secure from Poirot's observations, I pulled myself together and attacked the facts dispassionately. How much did Poirot know, and why was he bent on finding this girl? Did he suspect of her of having seen Jacques Renaud commit the crime? Or did he suspect, but that was impossible. The girl had no grudge against the elder Renaud, no possible motive for wishing his death, except that he was wearing Jack's overcoat. What had brought her back to the scene of the murder? I went over the facts carefully. She must have left the train at Calais, where I parted from her that day. No wonder I had been unable to find her on the boat. If she had dined in Calais and then taken a train out to Merlinville, she would have arrived at the Via Geneve just about the time that Francoise said. What had she done when she left the house just after 10? Presumably either gone to an hotel or returned to Calais. And then? The crime had been committed on Tuesday night. On Thursday morning she was once more in Merlinville. Had she ever left France at all? I doubted it very much. What kept her there? The hope of seeing Jacques Renaud? I had told her, as at the time we believed, that he was on the high seas en route to Buenos Aires. Possibly she was aware that the Anzora had not sailed, but to know that, she must have seen Jacques. Was that what Poirot was after? Had Jacques Renaud returned to see Marthe Daubriel, come face to face instead with Bella Duveen, the girl who he heartlessly thrown over? I began to see daylight. If that were indeed the case, it might furnish Jack with the alibi he needed. Yet under those circumstances his silence seemed difficult to explain. Why could he not have spoken out boldly? Did he fear for this former entanglement of his to come to the ears of Marthe Daubriel? I shook my head, dissatisfied. The things had been harmless enough, a foolish boy and girl affair, and I reflected cynically that the son of a millionaire was not likely to be thrown over by a penniless French girl, who moreover loved him devoutly without much graver cause. Poirot reappeared brisk and smiling at Dover, and our journey to London was uneventful. It was past 9 o'clock when we arrived, and I supposed that we should return straight away to our rooms and do nothing till the morning. But Poirot had other plans. Oh, hello, Rock. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us. I apologize if I was a bit delayed in replying. I don't have my earbuds in, and I was, engrossed in the story. I'll chat more between chapters. Let's see. Poirot had other plans. There we go. We must lose no time, mon ami. The news of the arrest will not be in the English papers until the day after tomorrow, but still we must lose no time. I did not quite follow his reasoning, but I merely asked how he proposed to find the girl. You remember Joseph Aaron, the theatrical agent? No? I assisted him in a little matter of a Japanese wrestler. A pretty little problem. I must recount it to you one day. He, without doubt, will be able to put us in the way of finding out what we want to know. It took us some time to run Mr. Aarons to earth, and it was after midnight when we finally managed it. He greeted Poirot with every evidence of warmth, and professed himself ready to be of service to us in any way. Oh, there is not much about the profession I don't know, he said, beaming genially. Eh bien, Monsieur Aarons, I desire to find a young girl called Bella Duveen. Bella Duveen. I know the name, but for a moment I can't place it. What's her line? That I do not know, but here is her photograph. Mr. Aarons studied it for a moment. Then his face lighted. Got it! He slapped his thigh. The Dulcibella Kids, by the Lord? The Dulcibella Kids? That's it. They're sisters, acrobats, dancers, and singers. Give quite a good little turn. They're in the provinces somewhere, I believe, if they're not resting. They've been on in Paris for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Can you find out for me exactly where they are? Easy as a bird. You go home, and I'll send you round the dope in the morning. With this promise, we took leave of him. He was as good as his word. About 11 o'clock the following day, a scribbled note reached us. The Dulcibella girls are on at the Palace in Coventry. Good luck to you. Without more ado, we started for Coventry. Poirot made no inquiries at the theatre, but contented himself with booking stalls for the variety performances that evening. The show was wearisome beyond words, or perhaps it was only my mood that made it seem so. Japanese families balanced themselves precariously. Would-be fashionable men in greenish evening dress and exquisitely slicked hair, reeling off society patter and dance marvelously. Stout prima donnas sang at the top of the human register. A comic comedian endeavored to be Mr. George Robey and failed signally. At last, the number went up which announced that the Dulcibella Kids. My heart beat sickeningly. There she was. There they both were, the pair of them, one flaxen-haired, one dark, matching as to size, with short, fluffy skirts and immense Buster Brown bows. They looked a pair of extremely piquant children. They began to sing. Their voices were fresh and true, rather thin and music-hally, but attractive. It was quite a pretty little turn. They danced neatly and did some clever little acrobatic feats. The words of their songs were crisp and catchy. When the curtain fell, there was a full meed of applause. Evidently, the Dulcibella Kids were a success. Suddenly, I felt that I could remain no longer. I must get out into the air. I suggested leaving to Poirot. By all means, go, bon ami. I amused myself and will stay to the end. I will rejoin you later. It was only a few steps from the theater to the hotel. I went up to the sitting room, ordered a whiskey and soda, and sat drinking it, staring meditatively into the empty grate. I heard the door open and turned my head, thinking that it was Poirot. Then I jumped to my feet. It was Cinderella who stood in the doorway. She spoke haltingly, her breath coming in little gasps. I saw you in front. You and your friend. When you got up to go, I was waiting outside and followed you. Why are you here, in Coventry? What were you doing here tonight? Is the man who was with you the detective? She stood there, the cloak she had wrapped round her stage dress slipping from her shoulders. I saw the whiteness of her cheeks under the rouge and heard the terror in her voice. And in that moment I understood everything. I understood why Poirot was seeking her, and what she feared, and understood at last in my own heart. Yes, I said gently. Is he looking for me? She half whispered. Then, as I did not answer for a moment, she slipped down by the chair and burst into violent, bitter weeping. I knelt down by her, holding her in my arms and smoothing the hair back from her face. Don't cry, child, don't cry, for God's sake. You're safe here. I'll take care of you. Don't cry, darling, don't cry. I know everything. Oh, but you don't! I think I do. And after a moment, as her sobs grew quieter, I asked, It was you who took the dagger, wasn't it? Yes. That was why you wanted me to show you round, and why you pretended to faint? Again she nodded. Why did you take the dagger? I asked presently. She replied as simply as a child. I was afraid there might be finger marks on it. But didn't you remember that you had worn gloves? She shook her head as though bewildered, and then said slowly, Are you going to give me up to the police? Good God, no! Her eyes sought mine long and earnestly, and then she asked in a little quiet voice that sounded afraid of itself, Why not? It seemed a strange place and a strange time for a declaration of love, and God knows in all my imaginings I never pictured love coming to me in such a guise. But I answered simply and naturally enough, Because I love you, Cinderella. She bent her head down as though ashamed and muttered in a broken voice, You can't. You can't. Not if you knew. And then, as though rallying herself, she faced me squarely and asked, What do you know, then? I know that you came to see Mr. Renaud that night. He offered you a check, and you tore it up indignantly, and you left the house. I paused. Go on, what next? I don't know whether you knew Jack Renaud would be coming that night, or whether you just waited about on the chance of seeing him, but you did wait about. Perhaps you were just miserable and walked aimlessly, but at any rate, just before 12, you were still near there, and you saw a man on the golf links." Again I paused. I had leapt to the truth in a flash as she entered the room, but now the picture rose before me even more convincingly. I saw vividly the peculiar pattern of the overcoat on the dead body of Mr. Renaud, and I remembered the amazing likeness that had startled me into believing for one instant that the dead man had risen from the dead when his son burst into our conclave in the salon. "Go on," repeated the girl steadily. "I fancy his back was to you, but you recognized him, or thought you recognized him. The gait and the carriage were familiar to you in the pattern of his overcoat." I paused. "You used to threaten one of your letters to Jack Renaud. When you saw him there, your anger and jealousy drove you mad, and you struck. I don't believe for a minute that you meant to kill him, but you did kill him, Cinderella." She had flung up her hands to cover her face, and in a choked voice she said, "You're right, you're right. I can see it all as you tell it." Then she turned on me almost savagely. "And you love me, knowing what you do? How can you love me?" "I don't know," I said, a little weary. "I think love is like that, a thing one cannot help. I have tried, I know, ever since the first day I met you, and love has been too strong for me." And then suddenly, when I least expected it, she broke down again, casting herself down on the floor and sobbing wildly. "Oh, I can't," she cried. "I don't know what to do. I don't know which way to turn. Oh, pity me, someone, and tell me what to do." Again I knelt by her, soothing her as best I could. "Don't be afraid of me, Bella. For God's sake, don't be afraid of me. I love you, that's true, but I don't want anything in return. Only let me help you. Love him still if you have to, but let me help you if he can't." It was as though she had been turned to stone by my words. She raised her head from her hands and stared at me. "You think that?" she whispered. "You think that I love Jack Renaud?" Then, half laughing, half crying, she flung her arms passionately round my neck and pressed her sweet, wet face to mine. "Not as I love you," she whispered. "Never as I love you." Her lips brushed my cheek, and then, seeking my mouth, kissed me again and again with a sweetness and fire beyond belief. The wildness of it, and the wonder I shall not forget. No, not as long as I live. It was a sound in the doorway that made us look up. Poirot was standing there looking at us. I did not hesitate. With a bound I reached him and pinioned his arms to his side. "Quick," I said to the girl, "get out of here, as fast as you can. I'll hold him." With one look at me, she fled out of the room past us. I held Poirot in a grip of iron. "Mon ami," observed the latter mildly, "you do this sort of thing very well. A strong man holds me in his grip, and I am helpless as a child. But all this is uncomfortable and slightly ridiculous. Let us sit down and be calm. You won't pursue her? What do you know? Ma Giraud? Release me, my friend." Keeping a suspicious eye upon him, for I paid Poirot the compliment of knowing that I was no match for him in astuteness, I relaxed my grip, and he sank into an armchair, feeling his arms tenderly. "It is that you have the strength of a bull when you are roused, Hastings. Bien. And you think you have behaved well to your old friend? I show you the girl's photograph, and you recognize it, but you never say a word." "There was no need if you knew that I recognized it," I said bitterly. So Poirot had known all along. I had not deceived him for an instant. "Ta-ta. You did not know that I knew that. And tonight you helped the girl to escape when you have found her with so much trouble. Eh bien, it comes to this. Are you going to work with me or against me, Hastings?" For a moment or two I did not answer. To break with my old friend gave me great pain. Yet I must definitely range myself against him. Would he ever forgive me, I wondered? He had been strangely calm so far, but I knew him to possess marvelous self-command. "Poirot," I said, "I'm sorry. I admit I behaved badly to you over this. But sometimes one has no choice, and in future I must take my own life." Poirot nodded his head several times. "I understand," he said. The mocking light had quite died out of his eyes, and he spoke with a sincerity and kindness that surprised me. "It is that, my friend, is it not? It is love that has come, not as you imagined it, all cock-a-hoop, with fine feathers, but sadly with bleeding feet. Well, well, I warned you. When I realized that this girl must have taken the dagger, I warned you. Perhaps you remember, but already it was too late. But tell me, how much do you know?" I met his eyes squarely. "Nothing that you could tell me would be any surprise to me, Poirot. Understand that. But in case you think of resuming your search for Miss Duveen, I should like you to know one thing clearly. If you have any idea that she was concerned in the crime, or was the mysterious lady who called upon Mr. Renaud that night, you are wrong. I travelled home from France with her that day, and parted from her at Victoria that evening, so that it is clearly impossible for her to have been in Merlinville." "Ah," Poirot looked at me thoughtfully. "And you would swear to that in a court of law?" "Most certainly I would." Poirot rose and bowed. "Mon ami, vive l'amour. It can perform miracles. It is decidedly ingenious that you have thought of what you have thought of there. It defeats even Hercule Poirot." We're between chapters, so I can chat a little bit. I hope you're having a good day, Rock. Thanks so much for joining me. And I hope things are going well where you are. Things have gotten a little more, let's see, what's the right word? Not intense, not extreme, but yeah, the cases in our area have risen drastically in the last week. So it's going to be interesting navigating the holiday season with, keeping all of the quarantine things, which, we're very good about observing. But I have worked, 18 holiday retails, and they get intense. So this is going to be even more interesting. All right, I'm going to continue. Chapter 23, Difficulties Ahead. After a moment of stress, such as I have just described, reaction is bound to set in. I retired to rest that night on a note of triumph, but I awoke to realize that I was by no means out of the wood. True, I could see no flaw in the alibi I had so suddenly conceived. I had but to stick to my story, and I failed to see how Bella could be convicted in face of it. But I felt the need of treading warily. Poirot would not take defeat lying down. Somehow or other he would endeavor to turn the tables on me, and that in the way, and at the moment when I least expected it. We met at breakfast the following morning as though nothing had happened. Poirot's good temper was imperturbable, yet I thought I detected a film of reserve in his manner which was new. After breakfast I announced my intention of going out for a stroll. A malicious gleam shot through Poirot's eyes. "It is information you seek. You need not be at the pains of deranging yourself. I can tell you all you wish to know. The Dulcibella girls have cancelled their contract and have left Coventry for an unknown destination." "Is that really so, Poirot?" "You can take it from me, Hastings. I made inquiries the first thing this morning. After all, what else did you expect?" True enough, nothing else could be expected under the circumstances. Cinderella had profited by the slight start I had been able to secure her, and would certainly not lose a moment in removing herself from the reach of the pursuer. It was what I had intended and planned. Nevertheless, I was aware of being plunged into a network of fresh difficulties. Hey, Butt, are you going to join me? Come on. Yeah. Impending cat. Come on. Thank you. I had absolutely no means of communicating with the girl, and it was vital that she should know the line of defense that had occurred to me, and which I was prepared to carry out. Of course, it was possible that she may try to send word to me in some way or other, but I hardly thought it likely. She would know the risk she ran of a message being intercepted by Poirot, thus setting him on her trap once more. Clearly, her only course was to disappear utterly for the time being. But in the meantime, what was Poirot doing? I studied him attentively. He was wearing his most innocent air and staring meditatively into the far distance. He looked altogether too placid and supine to give me reassurance. I had learned with Poirot that the less dangerous he looked, the more dangerous he was. His quiescence alarmed me. Observing the troubled quality in my glance, he smiled benignantly. You are puzzled, Hastings? You ask yourself why I do not launch myself in pursuit? Well, something of the kind. Is it what you would do were you in my place? I understand that. But I am not of those who enjoy rushing up and down a country, seeking a needle in a haystack, as you English say. No, let Mademoiselle Bella Devine go. Without a doubt, I shall be able to find her when the time comes. Until then, I am content to wait. I stared at him doubtfully. Was he seeking to mislead me? I had an irritating feeling that, even now, he was master of the situation. My sense of superiority was gradually waning. I had contrived the girl's escape, and evolved a brilliant scheme for saving her from the consequences of her rash act. But I could not rest easy in my mind. Poirot's perfect calm awakened 1,000 apprehensions. I suppose, Poirot, I said rather diffidently, I mustn't ask what your plans are. I've forfeited the right. But not at all. There is no secret about them. We return to France without delay. We? Precisely, we. You know very well that you cannot afford to let Papa Poirot out of your sight. Eh? Is it not so, my friend? But remain in England by all means if you wish. I shook my head. He had hit the nail on the head. I could not afford to let him out of my sight. Although I could not expect his confidence after what had happened, I could still check his actions. The only danger to Bella lay with him. Giraud and the French police were indifferent to her existence. At all costs, I must keep near Poirot. Poirot observed me attentively as these reflections passed through my mind, and gave me a nod of satisfaction. I am right, am I not? And as you are quite capable of trying to follow me, disguised with some absurdity such as a false beard, which everyone would perceive bien entendu, I must prefer that we should voyage together. It would annoy me greatly that anyone should mock themselves at you. Very well, then, but it's only fair to warn you. I know all. You are my enemy. Be my enemy, then. It does not worry me at all. So long as it's all fair and above board, I don't mind. You have to the full the English passion for fair play. Now your scruples are satisfied. Let us depart immediately. There's no time to be lost. Our stay in England has been short but sufficient. I know what I wanted to know. The tone was light, but I read a veiled menace into the words. Still, I began and stopped. Still, as you say, without doubt you are satisfied with the part you are playing. Me? I preoccupy myself with Jacques Renaud. Jacques Renaud. The words gave me a start. I had completely forgotten that aspect of the case. Jacques Renaud in prison, with the shadow of the guillotine looming over him. I saw the part I was playing in a more sinister light. I could save Bella. Yes, but in doing so I ran the risk of sending an innocent man to his death. I pushed the thought from me with horror. It could not be. He would be acquitted. Certainly he would be acquitted. But the cold fear came back. Suppose he were not. What then? Could I have it on my conscience? Horrible thought. Would it come to that in the end? A decision. Bella or Jacques Renaud. The promptings of my heart were to save the girl I loved at the cost of my life, or at any cost to myself. But if the cost were to another, the problem was altered. What would the girl herself say? I remembered that no word of Jacques Renaud's arrest had passed my lips. As yet she was in total ignorance of the fact that her former lover was in prison, charged with a hideous crime which he had not committed. When she knew, how would she act? Would she permit her life to be saved at the expense of his? Certainly she must do nothing rash. Jacques Renaud might, and probably would, be acquitted without any intervention on her part. If so, good, but if he was not? That was the terrible, the unanswerable problem. I fancied that she ran no risk of the extreme penalty. The circumstances of the crime were quite different in her case. She could plead jealousy and extreme provocation, and her youth and beauty would go for much. The fact that by a tragic mistake it was Mr. Renaud and not his son who paid the penalty would not alter the motive of the crime. But in any case, however lenient in the sentence of the court, it must mean a long term of imprisonment. No, Bella must be protected, and at the same time Jacques Renaud must be saved. How that was to be accomplished I did not see clearly, but I pinned my faith to Poirot. He knew. Come what might, he would manage to save an innocent man. He must find some pretext other than the real one. It might be difficult, but he would manage it somehow, and with Bella unsuspected and Jacques Renaud acquitted, all would end satisfactorily. So I told myself repeatedly, but at the bottom of my heart there still remained a cold fear. I'm really quickly going to check on something. Well, it looks like UK is streaming, so we will rate her when the stream is over. Chapter 24. Save him. We crossed from England by the evening boat, and the following morning saw us at St. Omer, whither Jacques Renaud had been taken. Poirot lost no time in visiting Monsieur Rotet, as he did not seem disposed to make any objections to my accompanying him. I bore him company. After various formalities and preliminaries, we were conducted to the examining magistrate's room. He greeted us cordially. "I was told that you had returned to England, Monsieur Poirot. I am glad to find that such is not the case." "Oh, it is true that I went there, monsieur, but it was only for a flying visit. A side issue, but one that I fancied might repay investigation." "And did it, eh?" Poirot shrugged his shoulders. Monsieur Rotet nodded, sighing. "We must resign ourselves, I fear. That animal Giraud, his manners are abominable, but he is undoubtedly clever. Not much chance of that one making a mistake." "You think not?" It was the examining magistrate's turn to shrug his shoulders. "Well, speaking frankly, in confidence, of course, can you come to any other conclusions?" "Frankly, there seems to me to be many points that are obscure." "Such as?" But Poirot was not to be drawn. not yet tabulated them," he remarked. "It was a general reflection that I was making. I like the young man, and should be sorry to believe him guilty of such a hideous crime. By the way, what has he to say for himself on the matter?" The magistrate frowned. "I cannot understand him. He seems incapable of putting up any sort of defense. It has been most difficult to get him to answer questions. He contents himself with a general denial, and beyond that takes refuge in a most obstinate silence. I am interrogating him again tomorrow. Perhaps you would like to be present?" We accepted the invitation with empressement. "A distressing case," said the magistrate with a sigh. "My sympathy for Madame Renaud is profound." "How is Madame Renaud?" "She has not yet recovered consciousness. It is merciful in a way. Poor woman, she is being spared much. Oh, I remember, she fell down the stairs and cracked her head on one of the stairs, so she's in a coma. Let's see. The doctors say there is no danger, but that when she comes to herself, she must be kept as quiet as possible. It was, I understand, quite as much the shock as the fall which caused her present state. It would be terrible if her brain became unhinged, but I should not wonder at all. No, really not at all." Monsieur Rotet leaned back, shaking his head with a sort of mournful enjoyment, as he envisaged the gloomy prospect. He roused himself at length, and observed with a start, "That reminds me, I have here a letter from you, Monsieur Poirot. Let me see, where did I put it?" He proceeded to rummage among his papers. At last he found the missive and handed it to Poirot. "It was sent under cover to me in order that I might forward it to you," he explained. "But as you left no address, I could not do so." Poirot studied the letter curiously. It was addressed in a long, sloping foreign hand, and the writing was decidedly a woman's. Poirot did not open it. Instead, he put it in his pocket and rose to his feet. "Till tomorrow, then. Many thanks for your courtesy and amiability." "But not at all. I am always at your service." We were just leaving the building when we came face to face with Giraud, looking more dandified than ever and thoroughly pleased with himself. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," he cried airily. "You have returned from England, then?" "As you see," said Poirot. "The end of the case is not far off now, I fancy." "I agree with you, Monsieur Giraud." Poirot spoke in a subdued voice. His crestfallen manner seemed to delight the other. "Of all the milk-and-water criminals, not an idea of defending himself. It is extraordinary." "So extraordinary that it gives one to think, does it not?" suggested Poirot mildly. But Giraud was not even listening. He twirled his cane amicably. "Well, good day, Monsieur Poirot. I'm glad you're satisfied of young Renaud's guilt at last." "Pardon, but I am not in the least satisfied. Jacques Renaud is innocent." Giraud stared for a moment, then burst out laughing, tapping his head significantly with the brief remark, "Touquet." Poirot drew himself up. A dangerous light showed in his eyes. "Monsieur Giraud, throughout the case your manner to me has been deliberately insulting. You need teaching a lesson. I am prepared to wager you 500 francs that I find the murder of Monsieur Renaud before you do. Is it agreed?" Giraud stared helplessly at him and murmured again, "Touquet." "Come now," urged Poirot. "Is it agreed?" "I have no wish to take your money from you. Make your mind easy, you are not." "Oh, well then, I agree. You speak of my manner as to you being insulting. Well, once or twice, your manner has annoyed me." "I am enchanted to hear it," said Poirot. "Good morning, Monsieur Giraud. Come, Hastings." I said no word as we walked along the street. My heart was heavy. Poirot had displayed his intentions only too plainly. I doubted more than ever my powers of saving Bella from the consequences of her act. This unlucky encounter with Giraud had roused Poirot and put him on his mettle. Suddenly I felt a hand laid on my shoulder and turned to face Gabriel Stoner. We stopped and greeted him, and he proposed strolling with us back to our hotel. "And what are you doing here, Monsieur Stoner?" inquired Poirot. "One must stand by one's friends," replied the other dryly, "especially when they are unjustly accused." "Then you do not believe that Jacques Renaud committed the crime?" I asked eagerly. "Certainly I don't. I know the lad. I admit that there have been one or two things in this business that have staggered me completely, but none the less, in spite of this fool way of taking it, I've never believed that Jacques Renaud is a murderer." My heart warmed to the secretary. His words seemed to lift a secret weight from my heart. "I have no doubt that many people feel as you do," I exclaimed. "There is really absurdly little evidence against him. I should say that there was no doubt of his acquittal, no doubt whatever." But Stoner hardly responded as I could have wished. "I'd give a lot to think as you do," he said gravely. He turned to Poirot. "What's your opinion, monsieur?" "I think that things look very black against him," said Poirot quietly. "You believe him guilty?" said Stoner sharply. "No, but I think he will find it hard to prove his innocence." "He's behaving so damned queerly," muttered Stoner. "Of course, I realize that there's a lot more in this affair than meets the eye. Giraud's not wise to that because he's an outsider, but the whole thing has been damned odd. As to that, least and soonest mended. If Mrs. Renaud wants to hush anything up, I'll take my cue from her. It's her show, and I've too much respect for her judgment to shove my oar in, but I can't get behind this attitude of Jack's. Anyone would think he wanted to be thought guilty." "But it's absurd," I cried, bursting in. "For one thing, the dagger—" I paused, uncertain as to how Poirot would wish me to reveal. I continued, choosing my words carefully. "We know that the dagger could not have been in Jacques Renaud's possession that evening. Mrs. Renaud knows that." "True," said Stoner. She recovers, she will doubtless say all this and more." "Well, I must be leaving you." "One moment." Poirot's hand arrested his departure. "Can you arrange for word to be sent to me at once should Mrs. Renaud recover unconsciousness?" "Recover consciousness. There we go, not unconsciousness." "Certainly, that's easily done." "That point about the dagger is good, Poirot," I urged as we went upstairs. I couldn't speak very plainly before Stoner. "That was quite right of you. We might as well keep the knowledge to ourselves as long as we can. As to the dagger, your point hardly helps Jacques Renaud. You remember that I was absent for an hour this morning before we started from London?" "Yes." "Well, I was employed in trying to find the firm Jacques Renaud employed to convert his souvenirs. It was not very difficult. Evian Hastings, they made to his order not 2 paper knives, but 3. So that, after giving one to his mother and one to Bella Duveen, there was a third which he doubtless retained for his own use. No, Hastings, I fear the dagger question will not help us to save him from the guillotine." "It won't come to that," I cried, stung. Poirot shook his head uncertainly. "You will save him," I cried positively. Poirot glanced at me dryly. "Have you not rendered it impossible, mon ami?" "Some other way," I muttered. Sapristi. Yeah, sapristi? Sure. But it is miracles you ask of me? No. Say no more. Let us instead see what it is in the letter." And he drew out the envelope from his breast pocket. His face contracted as he read. Then he handed the one flimsy sheet to me. "There are other women in the world who suffer, Hastings." The writing was blurred, and the note was had evidently been written in great agitation. Dear Monsieur Poirot, if you get this, I beg of you to come to my aid. I have no one to turn to, and it is at all costs Jack must be saved. I implore you on my knees to help us. Marthe d'Aubriel. I handed it back, moved. You will go? At once. We will command an auto. Half an hour later saw us at the Via Marguerite. Marthe was at the door to meet us, and let Poirot in, clinging with both hands to one of his. Ah, you have come. It is good of you. I have been in despair, not knowing what to do. They will not let me go to see him in prison even. I suffer horribly. I am nearly mad. Is it true what they say, that he does not deny the crime? That is madness. It is impossible that he should have done it. Never for 1 minute would I believe it. Neither do I believe it, mademoiselle, said Poirot gently. But then why does he not speak? I do not understand. Perhaps because he is screening someone, suggested Poirot, watching her. Marthe frowned. Screening someone? Do you mean his mother? From the beginning I have suspected her. Who inherits all that vast fortune? She does. It is easy to wear a widow's weeds and play the hypocrite. And they say that when he was arrested she fell down like that. She made a dramatic gesture, and without doubt Monsieur Stone or the secretary he helped her. They are thick as thieves, those two. It is true she is older than he, but what do men care if a woman is rich? There was a hint of bitterness in her tone. Stoner was in England, I put in. He says so, but who knows? Mademoiselle, said Poirot quietly, if we are to work together, you and I, we must have things clear. First, I will ask you a question. Yes, monsieur? Are you aware of your mother's real name? Marthe looked at him for a minute. Then, letting her head fall forward on her arms, she burst into tears. There, said Poirot, patting her on the shoulder. Calm yourself, petite. I know that you know. Now a second question. Did you know who Monsieur Renaud was? Monsieur Renaud? She raised her head from her hands and gazed at him wonderingly. Ah, I see you do not know that. Now listen to me carefully. Step by step he went over the case, much as he had done to me on the day of our departure for England. Marthe listened, spellbound. When he had finished, she drew a long breath. But you are wonderful, magnificent. You are the greatest detective in the world. With a swift gesture, she slipped off her chair and knelt before him with an abandonment that was wholly French. Save me, monsieur, she cried. I love him so. Oh, save him, save him. Chapter 25. An unexpected denouement. We were present the following morning at the examination of Jack Renaud. Short as the time had been, I was shocked at the change that had taken place in the young prisoner. His cheeks had fallen in, there were deep black circles round his eyes, and he looked haggard and distraught, as one who had wooed sleep in vain for several nights. He betrayed no emotion at seeing us. Renaud, began the magistrate, do you deny that you were in Merlinville on the night of the crime? Jack did not reply at once. Then he said, with a hesitancy of manner which was piteous, I told you that I was in Cherbourg. The magistrate turned sharply. Send in the station witnesses. In a moment or two, the door opened to admit a man whom I recognized as being a porter at Merlinville Station. You are on duty on the night of the 7th June? Yes, monsieur. You witnessed the arrival of the 11:40 train? Yes, monsieur. Look at the prisoner. Do you recognize him as having been one of the passengers to alight? Yes, monsieur. There is no possibility of your being mistaken. No, monsieur, I know Monsieur Jacques Renaud well. Nor of you being mistaken as to the date. No, monsieur, because it was the following morning, 8th June, that we heard of the murder. Another railway official was brought in and confirmed the first one's evidence. The magistrate looked at Jacques Renaud. These men have identified you positively. What have you to say? Jack shrugged his shoulders. Nothing. Renaud, continued the magistrate, do you recognize this? He took something from the table by his side and held it out to the prisoner. I shuddered as I recognized the airplane dagger. Pardon? Cried Jack's counsel, Maître Grossier. I demand to speak to my client before he answers that question. But Jacques Renaud had no consideration for the feelings of the wretched Grossier. He waved him aside and replied quietly, Certainly I recognize it. It was a present given to me by my mother. It was a present given by me to my mother, as a souvenir of the war. Is there, as far as you know, any duplicate of that dagger in existence? Again Maître Grossier burst out, and again Jack overrode him. Not that I know of. The setting was my own design. Even the magistrate almost gasped at the boldness of the reply. It did, in very truth, seem as though Jack was rushing... in very truth, interesting. Seem as though Jack was rushing on his fate. I realized, of course, the vital necessity he was under of concealing, for Bella's sake, the fact that there was a duplicate dagger in the case. So long as there was supposed to be only one weapon, no suspicion was likely to attach to the girl who had had the second paper knife in her possession. He was valiantly shielding the woman he had once loved, but at what cost to himself? I began to realize the magnitude of the task I had so lightly set Poirot. It would not be easy to secure the acquittal of Jacques Renaud by anything short of the truth. Monsieur Otey spoke again with a peculiarly biting inflection. Madame Renaud told us this dagger was on her dressing-table on the night of the crime. But Madame Renaud is a mother. It will doubtless astonish you, Renaud, but I consider it highly likely that Madame Renaud was mistaken, and that, by inadvertence perhaps, you had taken it with you to Paris. Doubtless you will contradict me. I saw the lad's handcuffed hands clench themselves. The perspiration stood out in beads upon his brow, as with a supreme effort he interrupted Monsieur Otey in a hoarse whisper. I shall not contradict you. It is possible. It was a stupefying moment. Maître Grossier rose to his feet, protesting. My client has undergone a considerable nervous strain. I should wish it put on record that I do not consider him answerable for what he says. The magistrate quelled him angrily. For a moment a doubt seemed to rise in his own mind. Jacques Renaud had almost overdone his part. He leaned forward and gazed at the prisoner, searchingly. Do you fully understand, Renaud, that on the answers you have given me, I shall have no alternative but to commit you for trials? Jack's face flushed. He looked steadily back. Monsieur Otey, I swear that I did not kill my father. The magistrate's brief moment of doubt was over. He laughed a short, unpleasant laugh. Without doubt. You are always innocent, our prisoners. But by your own mouth you are condemned. You can offer no defense, no alibi, only a mere assertion which would not deceive a babe. That you are not guilty. You killed your father, Renaud, a cruel and cowardly murder, for the sake of the money which you believed would come to you at his death. Your mother was an accessory after the fact, doubtless in view of that she acted as a mother. The courts will extend an indulgence to her that will not accord to you. And rightly so. Your crime was a horrible one, to be held in abhorrence by gods and men. Monsieur Rotet was interrupted, to his intense annoyance. The door was pushed open. Monsieur le Juge, stammered the attendant. There is a lady who says... Who is that? Cried the justly incensed magistrate. This is highly irregular. I forbid it. I absolutely forbid it. But a slender figure pushed the stammering gendarme aside. Dressed all in black, with a long veil that hid her face, she advanced into the room. My heart gave a sickening throb. She had come, then. All my efforts were in vain. Yet I could not but admire the courage that had led her to take this step so unfalteringly. She raised her veil, and I gasped, for, though as like her as two peas, this girl was not Cinderella. On the other hand, now that I saw her without the fair wig she had worn on the stage, I recognized her as the girl of the photograph in Jacques Renaud's room. "You are le juge d'instruction, Monsieur Rotet?" she queried. "Yes, but I forbid. My name is Bella Devine. I wish to give myself up for the murder of Mr. Renaud." Chapter 26. I receive a letter. My friend, you will know all when you get this. Nothing that I can say will move Bella. She has gone out to give herself up. I am tired out with struggling. You will know now that I deceived you, that where you gave me trust I repaid you with lies. It will seem perhaps indefensible to you that I should like, before I go out of your life forever, to show you just how it all came about. If I knew that you forgave me, it would make life easier for me. It wasn't for myself I did it. That's the only thing I can put forward to say for myself. I'll begin with the day I met you on the boat train from Paris. I was uneasy then about Bella. She was just desperate about Jacques Renaud. She'd have lain down on the ground for him to walk on, and when he began to change, and to stop writing so often, she began getting in a state. She got it into her head that he was keen on another girl, and of course, as it turned out afterwards, she was quite right there. She'd made up her mind to go to their villa at Merlinville and try and see Jack. She knew I was against it and tried to give me the slip. I found she was not on the train at Calais and determined I would not go on to England without her. I'd an uneasy feeling that something awful was going to happen if I couldn't prevent it. I met the next train from Paris. She was on it and set upon going out then and there to Merlinville. I argued with her for all I was worth, but it wasn't any good. She was all strung up and set upon having her own way. Well, I washed my hands of it. I'd done all I could. It was getting late. I went to an hotel, and Bella started for Merlinville. I still couldn't shake off my feeling of what the books call impending disaster. The next day came, but no Bella. She'd made a date with me to meet at the hotel, but she didn't keep it. No sign of her all day. I got more and more anxious. Then came an evening paper with the news. It was awful. I couldn't be sure, of course, but I was terribly afraid. I figured it out that Bella had met Papa Renaud and told him about her and Jack, and that he'd insulted her or something like that. We've both got terribly quick tempers. Then all the masked foreigner business came out, and I began to feel more at ease, but it still worried me that Bella hadn't kept her date with me. By the next morning, I was so rattled that I just got to go and see what I could. First thing, I ran up against you. You know all that. When I saw the dead man, looking so like Jack and wearing Jack's fancy overcoat, I knew. And there was the identical paper knife, wicked little thing, that Jack had given Bella. 10 to 1 it had her finger marks on it. I can't hope to explain to you the sort of helpless horror of that moment. I only saw one thing clearly. I must get hold of that dagger and ride away with it before they found out it was gone. I pretended to faint, and while you were away getting water, I took the thing and hid it away in my dress. I told you that I was staying at the Hotel de Fer, but of course, really I had a beeline back to Calais, and then on to England by the first boat. When we were in mid-channel, I dropped that little devil of a dagger into the sea, and I felt I could breathe again. Bella was in our digs in London. She looked like nothing on God's earth. I told her what I'd done, and that she was pretty safe for the time being. She stared at me and then began laughing. It was horrible to hear her. I felt that the best thing to do was to keep busy. She'd go mad if she had time to brood on what she'd done. Luckily, we got an engagement at once. And then I saw you and your friend watching us that night. I was frantic. You must suspect, and you wouldn't have tracked us down. I had to know the worst, so I followed you. I was desperate. And then, before I'd had time to say anything, I tumbled to it that it was me and you suspected, not Bella, or at least that you thought I was Bella, since I'd stolen the dagger. I wish, honey, that you could see back into my mind at that moment. You'd forgive me, perhaps. I was so frightened and muddled and desperate. All I could get clearly was that you would try and save me. I didn't know whether you'd be willing to save her. I thought very likely not. It wasn't the same thing, and I couldn't risk it. Bella's my twin. I'd got to do the best for her. So I went on lying. I felt mean. I feel mean still. That's all enough, too, you'll say, I expect. I ought to have trusted you, if I had. Oh, hey, Swags. Good to see you. Oh, my gosh, that is a cute little... Hey, Kickin'. Good to see you. Everybody's coming. And you're in time for the conclusion. Yes, come on, Snocking. As soon as the news was in the paper that Jack Renaud had been arrested, it was all up. Bella couldn't even wait to see how things went. I'm very tired. I can't write any more. She had begun to sign Cinderella, but had crossed that out and written instead, Dulcie Divine. Snockings, what? Come on. It is story time. It is quiet time for you. Sorry about all of the meowing. She is being very vocal today. It was an ill-written, blurred epistle, but I had kept it to this day. Poirot was with me when I read it. The sheets fell from my hand, and I looked across at him. Did you know all the time that it was the other? Yes, my friend. Why did you not tell me? To begin with, I could hardly believe it conceivable that you could make a mistake. You had seen the photograph. The sisters are very alike, but by no means incapable of distinguishment. But the fair hair, a wig, worn for the sake of piquant contrast on the stage. It is conceivable that with twins one should be fair and one dark. Why didn't you tell me that night at the hotel in Coventry? You were rather high-handed in your methods, mon ami, said Poirot dryly. You did not give me a chance. But afterwards? Afterwards. Well, to begin with, I was hurt at your want of faith in me, and then I wanted to see whether your feelings would stand the test of time. In fact, whether it was love or a flash in the pan with you. I should not have left you long in your error. I nodded. His tone was too affectionate for me to bear resentment. I looked down on the sheets of the letter. Suddenly I picked them up from the floor and pushed them across to him. Read that, I said. I'd like you to. He read it through in silence. Then he looked up at me. What is it that worries you, Hastings? This was quite a new mood in Poirot. His mocking manner seemed laid quite aside. I was able to say that I wanted without too much difficulty. She doesn't say well, whether she cares for me or not. Poirot turned back the pages. I think you are mistaken, Hastings. Where? I cried, leaning forward eagerly. Poirot smiled. She tells you that in every line of the letter, mon ami. But where am I to find her? There's no address on the letter. There's a French stamp, that's all. Excite yourself not. Leave it to Papa Poirot. I can find her for you as soon as I have 5 little minutes. Now I can chat a little bit. Doing well, Kickin'. How are you doing? How are things going over on your side of the pond? And I hope you have a good meeting, Swags. It's such a cute little badge. I love it. And of course, good to see you as always, Corell. You are fabulous. Are you going to be quiet for me, Snockings, so I can read without your interruptions? I don't know why you're so active today. But you're very soft, so I don't mind as much. And you're very purry. All right. Hiding Maestro, and we will get back to the story. Chapter 27, Jacques Renaud's Story. Congratulations, Monsieur Jacques, said Poirot, wringing the lad warmly by the hand. Young Renaud had come to us as soon as he was liberated. Before starting for Merlinville to rejoin Martha and his mother, Stoner accompanied him. His heartiness was in strong contrast to the lad's wan looks. It was plain that the boy was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He smiled mournfully at Poirot and said in a low voice, I went through it to protect her, and now it's all no use. You could hardly expect the girl to accept the price of your life, remarked Stoner dryly. She was bound to come forward when she saw you heading straight for the guillotine. Ah, ma foi, and you were heading for it too, added Poirot with a slight twinkle. You would have had Maître Grossier's death from rage on your conscience if you had gone on. He was a well-meaning ass, I suppose, said Jack, but he worried me horribly. You see, I couldn't very well take him into my confidence. My God, what's going to happen about Bella? If I were you, said Poirot frankly, I should not distress myself unduly. The French courts are very lenient on youth and beauty, and the crime passionnel. A clever lawyer will make out a great case of extenuating circumstances. It will not be pleasant for you. I don't care about that. You see, Monsieur Poirot, in a way I do feel guilty for my father's murder, but for me and my entanglement with this girl, he would be alive and well today. And then my cursed carelessness in taking away the wrong overcoat. I can't help feeling responsible for his death. It will haunt me forever. No, I said soothingly. Of course it's horrible to me to think that Bella killed my father, resumed Jack, but I treated her shamefully. After I met Martha and realized I'd made a mistake, I ought to have written and told her so honestly. But I was so terrified of a row and of its coming to Martha's ears and her thinking there was more in it than there ever had been, that, well, I was a coward and went on hoping that thing would die down of itself. I just drifted, in fact, not realizing that I was driving the poor kid desperate. If she'd really knifed me as she meant to, I should have got no more than my deserts. And the way she's come forward now is downright plucky. I'd have stood the racket, you know, up to the end. He was silent for a moment or two, and then burst out on another tack. What gets me is why the governor should be wandering about in underclothes and my overcoat at that time of night. I suppose he'd just given the foreign Johnnies the slip, and my mother must have made a mistake about its being 2 o'clock when they came. Or if it wasn't all a frame-up, was it? I mean, my mother couldn't think that it was me. Monsieur Poirot reassured him quickly. No, Monsieur Jacques. Have no fears on that score. As for the rest, I will explain it to you one of these days. It is rather curious, but will you recount to us exactly what did occur on that terrible evening? There's very little to tell. I came from Cherbourg, as I told you, in order to see Marta before going to the other end of the world. The train was late. I decided to take the short cut across the golf links. I could easily get into the grounds of the Villa Marguerite from there. I had nearly reached the place when... He paused and swallowed. Yes? I heard a terrible cry. It wasn't loud, a sort of choke and gasp, but it frightened me. For a moment I stood rooted to the spot. Then I came round the corner of a bush. There was moonlight. I saw the grave and a figure lying face downwards, with a dagger sticking in the back, and then I looked up and saw her. She was looking at me as though she saw a ghost. It's what she must have thought me at first. All expression seemed frozen on her face by horror. And then she gave a cry and turned and ran. He stopped, trying to master his emotion. And afterwards, said Poirot gently, I really don't know. I stayed there for a time, dazed, and then I realized I'd better get away as fast as I could. It didn't occur to me that they would suspect me, but I was afraid of being called upon to give evidence against her. I walked to Saint-Beauvier, as I told you, and got a car from there back to Cherbourg. A knock came to the door, and a page entered with a telegram, which he delivered to Stoner. He tore it open. Then he got up from his seat. Mrs. Renaud has gained consciousness, he said. Ah! Poirot sprang to his feet. Let us all go to Merlinville at once. A hurried departure was made forthwith. Stoner, at Jack's insistence, agreed to stay behind and do all that could be done for Bella Devine. Poirot, Jack Renaud, and I set off in the Renaud car. The run took just over 40 minutes. As we approached the doorway of the Villa Marguerite, Jack Renaud shot a questioning glance at Poirot. How would it be if you went in first, to break the news to my mother that I am free? Well, you break it in person to Mademoiselle Marthe, eh? Finished Poirot with a twinkle. But yes, by all means, I was about to propose such an arrangement myself. Jack Renaud did not wait for more. Stopping the car, he swung himself out and ran up the path to the front door. We went on in the car to the Villa Genève. Poirot, I said, do you remember how we arrived here that first day, and were met by the news of Mr. Renaud's murder? Ah, yes, truly. Not so long ago, either. But what a lot of things have happened since then, especially for you, mon ami. Yes, indeed, I sighed. Regarding it from the sentimental standpoint, Hastings, that was not my meaning. We will hope that Mademoiselle Bella will be dealt with leniently, and after all, Jack Renaud cannot marry both the girls. He spoke from a professional standpoint. This is not a crime well ordered and regular, such as a detective delights in. The mise en scène, designed by Georges Conan, that indeed is perfect, but the dénouement, ah, no. A man killed by accident in a girl's fit of anger, ah, indeed, what order of method is there in that? And in the midst of a fit of laughter on my part at Poirot's peculiarities, the door was opened by Françoise. Poirot explained that he must see Mrs. Renaud at once, and the old woman conducted him upstairs. I remained in the salon. It was some time before Poirot reappeared. He was looking unusually grave. Vous voilà, Hastings, sacre tonnerre. But there are squalls ahead. What do you mean? I cried. I would hardly have credited it, said Poirot thoughtfully. But women are very unexpected. Here are Jack and Marthe d'Aubriel, I exclaimed, looking out of the window. Poirot bounded out of the room and met the young couple on the steps outside. Do not enter. It is better not. Your mother is very upset. I know, said Jack Renaud. I must go up and see her at once. But no, I tell you, it is better not. Marthe and I, in any case, do not take Mademoiselle with you. Mount if you must, but you would be wise to be guided by me." A voice on the stairs behind made us all start. "Thank you for your good offices, Monsieur Poirot, but I will make my own wishes clear." We started in astonishment. Descending the stairs, leaning on Léonie, was Mrs. Renaud, her head still bandaged. The French girl was weeping and imploring her mistress to return to bed. "Madame will kill herself. It is contrary to all the doctor's orders." But Mrs. Renaud came on. "Mother!" cried Jack, starting forward. With a gesture she drove him back. "I am no mother of yours. You are no son of mine. From this day and hour I renounce you." "Mother!" cried the lad, stupefied. For a moment she seemed to waver, to falter before the anguish in his voice. Poirot made a meditating gesture, but instantly she regained command of herself. "Your father's blood is on your head. You are morally guilty of his death. You thwarted and defied him over this girl, and by your heartless treatment of another girl you brought about his death. Go out from my house. Tomorrow I intend to take such steps as shall make it certain that you shall never touch a penny of his money. Make your way in the world as best you can with the help of the girl who is the daughter of your father's bitterest enemy." And slowly, painfully, she retraced her way back upstairs. We were all dumbfounded, totally unprepared for such a demonstration. Jacques Renaud, worn out with all he had already gone through, swayed and nearly fell. Poirot and I went quickly to his assistance. "She is overdone," murmured Poirot to Marthe. "Where can we take him?" "But home, to the Villa Marguerite. We will nurse him, my mother and I. My poor Jack." We got the lad to the Villa, where he dropped limply onto the chair in a semi-dazed condition. Poirot felt his head and hands. "Yes, fever. The long strains begin to tell, and now this shock on top of it. Get him to bed, and Hastings and I will summon a doctor." The doctor was soon procured. After examining the patient, he gave it as his opinion that it was simply a case of nerve strain. With perfect rest and quiet, the lad might be almost restored by the next day, but if excited, there was a chance of brain fever. It would be advisable for someone to sit up all night with him. Finally, having done all we could, we left him in the charge of Marthe and her mother, and set out for the town. It was past our usual hour of dining, and we were both famished. The first restaurant we came to assured the pangs of hunger with an excellent omelette and an equally excellent entrecôte to follow. "And now for quarters of the night," said Poirot, when at length Café Noir had completed the meal. "Shall we try our old friend, the Hôtel du Bain?" We traced our steps there without more ado. Yes, monsieurs could be accommodated with 2 good rooms overlooking the sea. Then Poirot asked a question which surprised me. "Has an English lady, Miss Robinson, arrived?" "Yes, monsieur, she is in the little salon." "Ah!" "Poirot," I cried, keeping pace with him as he walked along the corridor, "who on earth is Miss Robinson?" Poirot beamed kindly at me. "It is that I have arranged you a marriage, Hastings." "But I say, bah!" said Poirot, giving me a friendly push over the threshold of the door. "Do you think I wish to trumpet aloud in Merlinville the name of Duveen?" It was indeed Cinderella who rose to greet us. I took her hand in both of mine. My eyes said the rest. Poirot cleared his throat. "Mes enfants," he said, "for the moment we have no time for sentiment. There is work ahead of us. Mademoiselle, were you able to do what I asked you?" In response, Cinderella took from her bag an object wrapped up in paper and handed it silently to Poirot. The latter unwrapped it. I gave a start, for it was the airplane dagger which I understood she had cast into the sea. Strange how reluctant women always are to destroy the most compromising of objects and documents. "Très bien, mon enfant," said Poirot. I am pleased with you. Now go and rest yourself. Hastings here and I have work to do. We shall see him tomorrow." "Where are you going?" asked the girl, her eyes widening. "You shall hear all about it tomorrow." "Because wherever you're going, I'm coming too." "But, mademoiselle, I'm coming too, I tell you." Poirot realized that it was futile to argue. He gave in. "Come then, mademoiselle, but it will not be amusing. In all probability, nothing will happen." The girl made no reply. 20 minutes later we set forth. It was quite dark now, a close, oppressive evening. Poirot led the way out of the town in the direction of the Via Genève. But when he reached the Via Marguerite, he paused. "I should like to assure myself that all goes well with Jack Renaud. Come with me, Hastings. Mademoiselle will perhaps remain outside. Madame d'Aubriel might say something which would wound her." We unlatched the gate and walked up the path. As we went round to the side of the house, I drew Poirot's attention to the window on the first floor. Thrown sharply on the blind was the profile of Marthe d'Aubriel. "Ah," said Poirot, "I figure to myself that is the room where we shall find Jacques Renaud." Madame d'Aubriel opened the door to us. She explained that Jack was much the same, but perhaps we would like to see for ourselves. She led us upstairs and into the bedroom. Marthe d'Aubriel was sitting by a table with a lamp on it, working. She put her finger to her lips as we entered. Jacques Renaud was sleeping an uneasy, fitful sleep, his head turning from side to side and his face still unduly flushed. "Is the doctor coming again?" asked Poirot in a whisper. "Not unless we send. He is sleeping. That is the great thing. Maman made him a tisane. A tisane, by the way, is an herbal tea." We sat down again with her embroidery as we left the room. She sat down again. Madame d'Aubriel accompanied us down the stairs. Since I had learned of her past history, I viewed this woman with increased interest. She stood there with her eyes cast down, the same very faint, enigmatical smile that I remembered on her lips. And suddenly I felt afraid of her, as one might feel afraid of a beautiful poisonous snake. "I hope you have not deranged, we have not deranged you, madame," said Poirot politely, as she opened the door for us to pass out. "Not at all, monsieur." "By the way," said Poirot, as though struck by an afterthought, "Monsieur Stoner has not been in Merlinville today, has he?" I could not at all fathom the point of this question, which I knew well to be meaningless as far as Poirot was concerned. Madame d'Aubriel replied quite composedly, "Not that I know of." "He has not had an interview with Madame Renaud?" "How should I know that, monsieur?" "True," said Poirot. "I thought you might have seen him coming or going, that is all. Good night, madame." "Why," I began. "No whys, Hastings. There will be time for that later." We rejoined Cinderella and made our way rapidly in the direction of the Via Genève. Poirot looked over his shoulder once at the lighted window and the profile of Marthe as she bent over her work. "He's being guarded at all events," he muttered. Arrived at the Via Genève, Poirot took up his stand behind some bushes to the left of the drive, where, while enjoying a good view ourselves, we were completely hidden from sight. The Via itself, in total darkness, everybody was without doubt in bed and asleep. We were almost immediately under the window of Mrs. Renaud's bedroom, which window, I noticed, was open. It seemed to me that it was upon this spot that Poirot's eyes were fixed. "What are we going to do?" I whispered. "Oh, I will hydrate now, and I will give kitties treats later." I think it was about time I needed to hydrate anyway. Let's see. "What are we going to do?" I whispered. "Watch. But I do not expect anything to happen for at least an hour, probably 2 hours, but His words were interrupted by a long, thin-drawn cry. "Help!" A light flashed up in the first room floor on the right-hand side of the front door. The cry came from there, and even as we watched, there came a shadow on the blind, as of two people struggling. "Mille tonnerre!" cried Poirot. "She must have changed her room." Dashing forward, he battered wildly at the front door. Then, rushing to the tree in the flower bed, he swarmed up it with the agility of a cat. I followed him, as with a bound he sprang in through the open window. Looking over my shoulder, I saw Dulcie reaching the branch behind me. "Take care!" I exclaimed. "Take care of your grandmother!" retorted the girl. "This is child's play to me." Poirot had rushed through... Oh, because she's an acrobat. Poirot had rushed through the empty room and was pounding on the door. "Locked and bolted on the outside," he growled, "and it will take time to burst it open." The cries for help were getting noticeably fainter. I saw despair in Poirot's eyes. He and I together put our shoulders to the door. Cinderella's voice, calm and dispassionate, came for the window. "You'll be too late. I guess I'm the only one who can do anything." Before I could move a hand to stop her, she appeared to leap from the window into space. I rushed and looked out. To my horror, I saw her hanging by her hands from the roof, propelling herself along by jerks in the direction of the lighted window. "Good heavens, she'll be killed!" I cried. "You forget she's a professional acrobat, Hastings. It was the providence of the good God that made her insist on coming with us tonight. I only pray that she may be in time." "Ah!" A cry of absolute terror floated out onto the night as the girl peered through the window, and then in Cinderella's clear tones came the words, "No, you don't! I've got you, and my wrists are just like steel!" At the same moment the door of our prison was opened cautiously by Françoise. Poirot brushed her aside unceremoniously and rushed down the passage to where the other maids were grouped round the farther door. "It's locked on the inside, monsieur." There was the sound of a heavy fall within. After a moment or two, the key turned and the door swung slowly open. Cinderella, very pale, beckoned us in. "She is safe?" demanded Poirot. "Yes, I was just in time. She was exhausted." Mrs. Renaud was half sitting, half lying on the bed. She was gasping for breath. "Nearly strangled me," she murmured painfully. The girl picked up something from the floor and handed it to Poirot. It was a rolled-up ladder of silk rope, very fine but quite strong. "A getaway," said Poirot, "by the window while we were battering at the door. Where is the other?" The girl stood aside a little and pointed. On the ground laid a figure wrapped in some dark material, a fold of which hid the face. "Dead?" She nodded. "I think so. Head must have struck the marble fender." "Who was it?" I cried. "The murderer of Renaud, Hastings, and the would-be murderer of Madame Renaud." Puzzled and uncomprehending, I knelt down and lifted the fold of cloth, looking into the dead, beautiful face of Marthe d'Aubriel. Oh, now there's a turn. Hey, Maestro. You're going to get a treat soon. Chapter 28. Journey's End. I have confused memories of the further events of that night. Poirot seemed deaf to my repeated questions. He was enraged in overwhelming Françoise with reproaches for not having told him of Mrs. Renaud's change of sleeping quarters. I caught him by the shoulder, determined to attract his attention and make myself heard. "But you must have known," I expostulated. "You were taken up to see her this afternoon." Poirot deigned to attend to me for a brief moment. "She had been wheeled on a sofa into the middle room, her boudoir," he explained. "But, monsieur," cried Françoise, "Madame changed her room almost immediately after the crimes. The associations—" "They were too distressing." "Then why was I not told?" vociferated Poirot, striking the table and working himself into a first-class passion. "I demand of you, why was I not told? You are an old woman completely imbecile, and Léonie and Denise are no better. All of you are triple idiots. Your stupidity has nearly caused the death of your mistress. But for this courageous child," He broke off, and darting across the room to where the girl was bending over ministering to Mrs. Renaud, he embraced her with Gallic fervour, slightly to my annoyance. I was aroused from my condition of mental fog by a sharp command from Poirot to fetch the doctor immediately on Mrs. Renaud's behalf. After that I might summon the police, and, he added, to complete my dudgeon, "It will hardly be worth your while to return here. I shall be too busy to attend to you, and of mademoiselle here I make a grande malade." I retired with what dignity I could command. Having done my errands, I returned to the hotel. I understood next to nothing of what had occurred. The events of the night seemed fantastic and impossible. Nobody would answer my questions. Nobody had seemed to hear them. Angrily, I flung myself onto the bed and slept the sleep of the bewildered and utterly exhausted. I awoke to find the sun pouring in through the open window, and Poirot, neat and smiling, sitting beside the bed. "Enfin, you are awake. But it is that you are a famous sleeper, Hastings. Do you know that it is nearly 11 o'clock? I groaned and put a hand to my head. "I must have been dreaming," I said. "Do you know, I actually dreamt that we found Marthe d'Aubriel's body in Mrs. Renaud's room, and that you declared her to have murdered Mr. Renaud? You are not dreaming. All that is quite true." "But Bella Devine killed Mr. Renaud." "Ah, no, Hastings, she did not. She said she did, yes, but that was to save the man she loved from the guillotine." "What? Remember Jacques Renaud's story? They both arrived on the scene on the same instant, and each took the other to be the proprietor of the crime. The girl stares at him in horror, and then with a cry rushes away. When she hears that the crime has been brought home to him, she cannot bear it, and comes forward to accuse herself and save him from certain death." Poirot leaned back in his chair and brought the tips of his fingers together in familiar style. "The case was not quite satisfactory to me," he observed judicially. "All along I was strongly under the impression that we were dealing with a cold-blooded and premeditated crime committed by someone who had contented themselves very cleverly with using Monsieur Renaud's own plans for throwing the police off the track. The great criminal, as you may remember my remarking to you once, is always supremely simple." I nodded. "Now, to support this theory, the criminal must have been fully cognizant of Monsieur Renaud's plans. That leads us to Mrs. Renaud. But facts fail to support any theory of her guilt. Is there anyone else who might have known of them? Yes. From Marthe d'Aubriel's own lips we have the admission that she overheard Mr. Renaud's quarrel with the tramp. If she could overhear that, there is no reason why she should not have overheard everything else, especially if Mr. and Madame Renaud were imprudent enough to discuss their plans sitting on the bench. Remember how easily you overheard Marthe's conversation with Jacques Renaud from that spot? But what possible motivation could Marthe have for murdering Mr. Renaud? I argued. What motive? Money! Renaud was a millionaire several times over, and at his death, or so she and Jacques believed, half of that vast fortune would pass to his son. Let us construct the scene from the standpoint of Marthe d'Aubriel. Marthe d'Aubriel overhears what passes between Renaud and his wife. So far he has been a nice little source of income to the d'Aubriel mother and daughter, but now he proposes to escape from their toils. At first, possibly, her idea is to prevent that escape. But a bolder idea takes its place, and one that fails to horrify the daughter of Jean Beroldi. At present, Renaud stands inexorably in the way of her marriage with Jacques. If the latter defies his father, he will be a pauper, which is not at all in the mind of Mademoiselle Marthe. In fact, I doubt if she has ever cared a straw for Jacques Renaud. She can stimulate emotion, but in reality she is of the same cold, calculating type as her mother. I doubt, too, whether she was really very sure of her hold over the boy's affections. She had dazzled and captivated him, but separated from her, as his father could so easily manage to separate him, she might lose him. But with Renaud dead and Jack the heir to half his millions, the marriage can take place at once, and at a stroke he will attain wealth, not the beggarly thousands that have been extracted from him so far. And her clever brain takes in the simplicity of the thing. It is all so easy. Renaud is planning all the circumstances of his death. She has only to step in at the right moment and turn the farce into a grim reality. And here comes in the second point, which led me infallibly to Marthe d'Aubriel. The dagger. Jack Renaud had 3 souvenirs made. One he gave to his mother, one to Bella Duveen. Was it not highly probable that he had given the 3rd one to Marthe d'Aubriel? So then, to sum up, there were 4 points of note against Marthe d'Aubriel. 1. Marthe d'Aubriel could have overheard Renaud's plans. 2. Marthe d'Aubriel had a direct interest in causing Renaud's death. 3. Marthe d'Aubriel was the daughter of the notorious Madame Beroldi, who in my opinion was morally and virtually the murderess of her husband, although it may have been Georges Conneau's hand which struck the actual blow. 4. Marthe d'Aubriel was the only person besides Jack Renaud likely to have the 3rd dagger in her possession. Poirot paused and cleared his throat. Of course, when I realized of the existence of the other girl, Bella Duveen, I realized that it was quite possible that she might have killed Renaud. The solution did not commend itself to me, because, as I pointed out to you, Hastings, an expert, such as I am, likes to meet a foeman worthy of his steel. Still, one must take crimes as one finds them, not as one would like them to be. It did not seem very likely that Bella Duveen would be wandering about carrying a souvenir paper knife in her hand, but of course she might have had some idea of all the time of revenging herself on Jacques Renaud. When she actually came forward and confessed to the murder, it seemed that all was over. And yet I was not satisfied, mon ami. I was not satisfied. I went over the case minutely, and I came to the same conclusion as before. If it was not Bella Duveen, the only other person who could have committed the crime was Marthe d'Aubriel. But I had not one single proof against her. And then you showed me that letter from Mademoiselle Dulcie, and I saw a chance of settling the matter once and for all. The original dagger was stolen by Dulcie Duveen and thrown into the sea, since, as she thought, it belonged to her sister. But if by chance it was not her sister's, but the one given by Jack to Marthe d'Aubriel, why then Bella Duveen's dagger would still be intact. I said no word to you, Hastings. It was no time for romance, but I sought out Mademoiselle Dulcie, told her as much as I deemed needful, and set her to search among the effects of her sister. Imagine my elation when she sought me out, according to my instructions, as Miss Robinson with the precious souvenir in her possession. In the meantime, I had taken steps to force Mademoiselle Marthe into the open. By my orders, Madame Renaud repulsed her son, and declared her intentions of making a will on the morrow, which should cut him off from ever enjoying even a portion of his father's fortune. It was a desperate step, but a necessary one, and Madame Renaud was fully prepared to take the risk, though unfortunately she also never thought of mentioning her change of room. I suppose she took it for granted that I knew. All happens as I thought. Marthe d'Aubriel made a last bold bid for the Renaud millions, and failed. What absolutely bewilders me, I said, is how she ever got into the house without our seeing her. It seems an absolute miracle. We left her behind in the Ville Marguerite. We go straight to the Ville Genève, and yet she's there before us. Ah, but we did not leave her behind. She was out of the Via de Marguerite by the back way, while we were talking to the mother in the hall. That is where, as the Americans say, she put it over on Hercule Poirot. But the shadow on the blind, we saw it from the road. Eh bien, when we looked up, Madame d'Aubriel had just had time to run upstairs and take her place. Madame d'Aubriel? Yes, one is old and one is young, one is dark and one is fair, but for the purpose of a silhouette on a blind, their profiles are singularly alike. Even I did not suspect, triple imbecile that I was, I thought I had plenty of time before me, that she would not try to gain admission to the Via until much later. She had brains, that beautiful Mademoiselle Marthe, and her object was to murder Mrs. Renaud. Yes, the whole fortune would then pass to her son, but it would have been suicide, mon ami. On the floor by Marthe d'Aubriel's body I found a pad and a little bottle of chloroform, and a hypodermic syringe containing a fatal dose of morphine. You understand? The chloroform first, then, when the victim was unconscious, the prick of the needle. By the morning, the smell of the chloroform had quite disappeared, and the syringe lies where it had fallen from Madame Renaud's hand. What would you say, the excellent Monsieur Rotet? Poor woman, what did I tell you? The shock of joy! It was too much on top of the rest. Did I not say that I should not be surprised if her brain became unhinged, although a most tragic case, the Renaud case? However, Hastings, things did not quite go as Mademoiselle Marthe had planned. To begin with, Madame Renaud was awake and waiting for her. There is a struggle, but Madame Renaud is terribly weak still. There is a last chance for Marthe d'Aubriel. The idea of a suicide is at an end. But if she can silence Madame Renaud with her strong hands, make a getaway with her little silk ladder while we are still battering on the inside of the farther door, and we go back to the Via Marguerite before we return here, it will be hard to prove anything against her. But she was checkmated, not by Hercule Poirot, but by la petite acrobate, with her wrists of steel. I mused over the whole story. When did you first begin to suspect Marthe d'Aubriel, Poirot? When she told us she had overheard the quarrel in the garden? Poirot smiled. My friend, you remember when we drove into Merlinville that first day, and the beautiful girl we saw standing at the gate? You asked me if I had noticed a young goddess, and I replied to you that I had only seen a girl with anxious eyes. That is how I have thought of Marthe d'Aubriel from the beginning. The girl with the anxious eyes. Why was she so anxious? Not on Jacques Renaud's behalf, for she did not know then that he had been in Merlinville the previous evening. By the way, I exclaimed, how is Jacques Renaud? Much better. He is still at the Via Marguerite, but Madame d'Aubriel has disappeared. The police are looking for her. Was she in with her daughter, do you think? We shall never know. Madame is a lady who can keep her secrets, and I doubt very much if the police will ever find her. Has Jacques Renaud been told? Not yet. It will be a terrible shock to him, naturally. And yet, you know, Hastings, I doubt if his heart was ever seriously engaged. So far we have looked upon Bella Duveen as a siren and Marthe d'Aubriel as the girl he really loved. But I think that if we reverse the terms, we should come nearer to the truth. Marthe d'Aubriel was very beautiful. She set herself to fascinate Jack, and she succeeded. But remember his curious reluctance to break with the other girl. And see how he was willing to go to the guillotine rather than implicate her. I have a little idea that when he learns the truth, he will be horrified, revolted, and his false love will wither away. What about Giraud? Oh, he has a crease of the nerves, that one. He has been obliged to return to Paris. We both smiled. Poirot proved a fairly true prophet. When at length the doctor pronounced Jacques Renaud strong enough to hear the truth, it was Poirot who broke it to him. The shock was indeed terrific. Yet Jack rallied better than I could have supposed possible. His mother's devotion helped him to live through those difficult days. The mother and son were inseparable now. There was a further revelation to come. Poirot had acquainted Mrs. Renaud with the fact that he knew her secret, and had represented to her that Jack should not be left in ignorance of his father's past. To hide the truth never does it avail, madame. Be brave, and tell him everything. With a heavy heart, Mrs. Renaud consented, and her son learned that the father he had loved had been in actual fact a fugitive from justice. The halting question was promptly answered by Poirot. Reassure yourself, Monsieur Jack. The world knows nothing. As far as I can see, there is no obligation for me to take the police into my confidence. Throughout the case I have acted, not for them, but for your father. Justice overtook him at last, but no one need ever know that he was Georges Queneau. He and Georges Queneau were one and the same. There were, of course, various points in the case that remained puzzling to the police, but Poirot explained things in so plausible a fashion that all query about them was gradually stilled. Shortly after we got back to London, I noticed a magnificent model of a foxhound adorning Poirot's mantelpiece. In answer to my inquiring glance, Poirot nodded. "Mais oui, I got my 500 francs. He is not a splendid fellow? I call him Giraud." A few days later, Jack Renaud came to see us with a resolute expression on his face. "Monsieur Poirot, I've come to say goodbye. I'm sailing for South America almost immediately. My father had large interests over the continent, and I mean to start a new life out there." "You go alone, Monsieur Jacques?" "My mother comes with me, and I shall keep Stoner on as my secretary. He likes out-of-the-way parts of the world." "No one else goes with you?" Jack flushed. "You mean a girl who loves you very dearly, who has been willing to lay down her life for you?" "How could I ask her?" muttered the boy. "After all that has happened, could I go to her and... Oh, what sort of lame story could I tell? Les femmes, they have a wonderful genius for manufacturing crutches for stories like that." "Yes, but I've been such a damned fool." "So have all of us, one time or another," Poirot observed philosophically. But Jack's face had hardened. "There's something else. I'm my father's son. Would anyone marry me knowing that?" "You are your father's son, you say. Hastings here will tell you that I believe in heredity. Well then, wait. I know a woman of courage and endurance, capable of great love, of supreme self-sacrifice." The boy looked up. His eyes softened. "My mother?" "Yes. You are your mother's son as well as your father's. Then go to Mademoiselle Bella, tell her everything, keep nothing back, and see what she says." Jack looked irresolute. Go to her as a boy no longer, but a man bowed by the fate of the past and the fate of today, but looking forward to a new and wonderful life. Ask her to share it with you. You may not realize it, but your love for each other has been tested in the fire and not found wanting. You have both been willing to lay down your lives for each other. And what of Captain Arthur Hastings, humble chronicler of these pages? There is some talk of his joining the Renauds on a ranch across the sea, but for the end of this story I prefer to go back to a morning in the garden of the Villa Geneve. "I can't call you Bella," I said, "since it isn't your name, and Dulcie seems so unfamiliar. So it's gotta be Cinderella. Cinderella married the prince, you remember." "I'm not a prince, but," she interrupted me, "Cinderella warned you, I'm sure. You see, she couldn't promise to turn into a princess. She was only a little scullion, after all." "It's the prince's turn to interrupt," I interloped. "Do you know what he said?" "No." "Hell," said the prince, and kissed her. And I suited the action to the word. All right, we have reached the end of The Murder on the Links. Oh, let me get Maestro back up there. And now it's time to give the kitties treats. Let me find them. Kitties. Oh, there you are, Maestro. I gotta get stockings. Hey, Papa. Howdy. Hey, Pants, wear stockings. Hey, bud. Come on. Treat times. Come on. Corral is giving you treats. Come on, both of you. Kitties, come on. There you go. Stockings, you too. Come on. Sorry, switching this back here. Stockings. Come on. Here you go, Maestro. Ah. Okay, I'm actually going to have to dig her out of blankets. Stockings, you're going the wrong way. Come here. Hey, idiot. Thanks, you too, Corral. Nice. Nice. Got our little bit of kitty ASMR. All right. The kitties thank you, Corral. And I thank you for hanging out with me. And let's go ahead. Let's see if UK is still streaming, and then we'll raid her. Let's see. Taking a look. Oh, yes, she is. Excellent. So we will raid her. All right. Thank you again so much for hanging out with me. And let's see, the next Storytime stream is going to be, nope, that was, just getting my away message copied, or not away message. There we go. Next Storytime stream is going to be next Monday, 2 to 4 Pacific time. We are going to be reading some Poirot short stories from Poirot Investigates. So I hope you guys have a good week. I will let you know if I'm going to be doing any impromptu art or game streams. In the meantime, let's go ahead and raid UK. And I'll see you next time. Bye.
Click.